Hey everyone, and welcome back. Ready to flex those language muscles.
Always up for a good language workout.
Today we're tackling a topic that often makes Italian learners, well, a little nervous.
Yeah, I can see why.
We're diving deep into the world of Italian verb conjugations.
They've definitely got a reputation, right?
They do. But with a little guidance and the right tools like Pronunciator, we can demystify these tricky verbs, so no need to feel overwhelmed.
What do you say we jump right in?
Let's go for it.
Now, the source material we have keeps mentioning something called, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, highly inflected verbs.
You got it.
Okay, phew. But to be honest, that sounds a bit intimidating. Can you break it down for us? What does that even mean in plain English?
So, highly inflected basically means Italian verbs are real shapeshifters. They change depending on who's doing the action, when they're doing it, even how they're feeling about it.
Oh, wow. So it's not just about the verb itself. It's about all these other factors that come into play. You got it. And that's where our friend, the conjugation, comes in. Instead of relying on those little helper words like we do in English, think will or did, Italian packs all that info right into the verb ending itself. Pretty cool, right?
That is pretty cool. But I can definitely see how that would be a bit of a brain twister if you're used to English grammar.
For sure. It's a whole new way of thinking about verbs.
Absolutely. Now, I have to ask, this whole highly inflected thing, is that why, when I'm using Pronunciator, it seems like there are a million different forms for every single Italian verb?
You're definitely not imagining things. It's like Italian verbs have a whole wardrobe of different forms, one for each grammatical situation.
It does feel that way, right? And the source material actually mentioned that this is a big tripping point for a lot of beginners. It's not just me, which is, I don't know, kind of comforting.
Not at all. It's super common to feel overwhelmed by all those different forms, especially at first. But here's the good news. It gets easier with practice.
That's what I like to hear. But speaking of challenges, we have to talk about irregular verbs. Do those guys even bother following any rules?
Irregular verbs. They're definitely the rule breakers of the verb world.
Every language seems to have them.
Right. But here's the thing. Even those rebellious verbs have patterns you can pick up. Like, let's take the verb fare, meaning to do. In the present tense, instead of the stem far staying put, it changes to fe for you do. These little quirks pop up in other verbs too, so once you recognize the pattern, you're golden.
Okay, so it's all about pattern recognition with those irregular verbs. That actually makes a lot of sense. So it's like solving a little puzzle each time you come across one, which is kind of fun if you think about it.
Exactly. And when you're using a tool like Pronunciator, you can really start to see those patterns in action.
That's a great point. Pronunciator can really be your secret weapon for cracking the code of Italian verbs. But there's one more thing we need to talk about before we wrap up. The source material also highlighted a couple of specific tenses that seem to trip people up. The passato prossimo and the imperfetto. Can you unpack those for us?
Of course, they're both past tenses, which can make them seem super similar at first glance, but they actually have pretty distinct uses.
Okay, so how do I know which one to use?
Think of it like this. You're telling a story, right? The passato prossimo is your go-to for stating a past action clearly and directly, like, I ate the pasta, for example.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about the imperfetto? When would I use that one?
The imperfetto is more about setting the scene or describing an ongoing action in the past. So instead of I ate the pasta, you'd say I was eating the pasta, which could imply something else happened while you were enjoying your meal.
Oh, that's a really good distinction. So the imperfetto is more about painting a picture of what was happening.
Exactly. It adds a different layer of meaning to your verbs and your storytelling.
And those subtle shades of meaning are what make languages so fascinating. So to sum it all up, what we've learned today is that Italian verb conjugations, while they might seem a bit daunting at first, are really all about patterns and nuances.
Exactly. It's like a little puzzle, but a fun one.
And remember, practice makes perfect, or at least it makes progress. So keep practicing with your pronunciator, pay attention to those patterns, and most importantly, have fun while you're learning.
Absolutely. Enjoy the journey.
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. We'll be back soon with more language adventures. Until then, happy learning.